Qualcomm technologies. And this technology is really about context and user context. I want to talk to you a minute about sort of the promise that location-based services made not that long ago. Cast your mind back a few years when everyone was talking about location-based services and how wonderful they were going to be. You would be able to go out for a walk in a new city, and automatically all the information you would need would be given to you by an application. You would know all the interesting things to see. You would know when you went to a foreign city, you wouldn't have to worry about getting guidebooks because you'd be able to get all that information automatically. You would be able to download it over the air, no problems. If you were working for a company, you could always keep track of your goods or your people or your transport equipment or your trucks or whatever it was very easily because it would always be on your mobile phone. You could sort of tell where people were and whether people were doing the right thing. And you could click a mouse on a computer in the office and it would show you where all your trucks were at any point in time. If you were working in retail, maybe you have a shop or a cafe, and maybe it's a bit slow in the afternoon, and it would be easy to send a message to anyone walking by saying, hey, come in, discount cup of coffee to their mobile phones using location-based services. And when we arrived at home, well, your devices would know that you were home, and so the air conditioning would be turned on and the lights would be in the right place and the oven would be on, ready for dinner. And the entertainment system would play music. All these things would be possible. Well, the vision was great, but we're still a long way short, I think, of this. With some work and maybe some research before I come to a new city, I might be able to find an app that I could download that would tell me some interesting things about the city. But usually I find myself relying on Google Maps wherever I go. I can search okay, but I've got lots of sensors on my device that aren't being used. Why do I have to do so much searching to find out what's worth seeing? Why can't the location data be more used to me? Also, whenever I have an app that gets my location, honestly, as a consumer, I'm always worried about other people knowing where I am. I'm always worried about the CIA, knowing where I am. And as a consumer, I want to be confident that my information is not being misused. I want to be confident that when I use a location-based service in an application, that my data isn't being sold to someone else. And especially in a free application, there's the old saying that if it doesn't cost you anything to buy an application, then you are the product. Your data is being sold to somebody else in order to make money. So if you can't see where the product is, then you are the product. So you always have to be very careful. The other thing is that I don't like the impact a lot of these services have on my battery life. If you use GPS and Google Maps to walk around a city, you'll find very quickly, at least on the iPhone, that your battery is dead very fast. I don't want to have to sacrifice my battery life to get useful information. So anyway, these are some examples of apps and app possibilities. And you can purchase some which will give you some solutions to some parts of the problem, but there isn't a good solution for the whole thing. I'm still waiting for something that makes automating some of these things practical. And for app developers, I think this is a big opportunity. How to automate the process when I get home, putting things in the right, getting the lighting and the air conditioning on, knowing when I've arrived at the office, knowing when I've arrived at various locations that I go to. And I think there's big opportunities there. So this all adds up to a big challenge for you. So if you're creating an application, you've got to think about all these things. So the first one, is how do I find out what my users are at the same time as I respect their privacy? How can I ensure that when I give information, I push information to my users, that they find it relevant, that they're not going to be confused by what I'm sending them or annoyed by it? If you've used apps enough on your phone, you're probably getting pushed lots of information. You find yourself switching off push notifications because it's getting really irritating. Because the application developer doesn't know enough about me to know that they're pushing me something that I'm going to find interesting. How can I do these things without wasting the battery of my user? How can I avoid, when I'm writing this as an app developer, I don't want to waste my time. I don't have much time. I want to make an app and put it out on the market. I don't want to waste a lot of time reinventing the wheel. I don't want to have to write everything twice. It's hard to make money in apps. At least I find it hard to make money in apps. So I'm sure you do too. So how can I do these sorts of functionality, enable this sort of location functionality without it costing me lots of money? Because there are plenty of people who will sell solutions to you, but I can't afford those. I don't even know if my app will make any money. So it's a very big risk for me to pay someone else to do this. Well, let me have I'm going to show you a short video now which gives you some background into how Gimbal works and how it helps you to solve some of these problems.
Introducing Gimbal, a new mobile context awareness platform that allows you to infuse your mobile application with rich contextual awareness through dynamic features. Gimbal includes a geofencing feature, which creates a virtual perimeter around the physical space so that the phone is aware of visited locations. The Gimbal interest sensing feature constructs a progressive user interest graph from user behaviors through web, application, and location history. The stunning image recognition feature brings a new dimension to the mobile experience for enhanced product interaction enabled by image scanning. Gimbal merges location, time, and user profile to deliver enlightened, relevant, context-rich push notifications. Assure users with Gimbal's highly customizable controls designed to offer effective security and privacy features that allow data to be stored and kept on the mobile device. With Gimbal, you can create and measure every element of your project. Set, write, customize, and schedule your campaign. Attain access to untapped data on the mobile device, allowing for powerful analytics. Meet Samantha. Samantha is tired of overwhelming, irrelevant advertisements, texts, emails, and application notifications bombarding her phone. Meet Samantha's phone. This is no ordinary phone because it contains applications powered by Gimbal, which delivers context-aware, personalized, relevant content, all provided in accordance with highly customizable user controls for privacy. Samantha happens to like pizza and movies. Samantha has 3 kids, Theo, Leo, and Mia, who also love pizza and movies, just like their mom. On Tuesday, Samantha drives to pick up her kids from school. As they embark on their journey home, they drive by a newly opened pizza restaurant. Now, Samantha's phone knows her and her family like pizza because of her recent pizza purchase history, a part of Gimbal's interest graphing capability. Her phone can also sense when Samantha is about 2 minutes away from the pizza restaurant with Gimbal's high-tech geofencing feature. So, as they approach the restaurant location, her Gimbal-powered app detects the pizza restaurant and delivers a promotional family discount for her usual family pizza order through a context-rich push notification. Pizza is a good thing because today is Samantha's turn to make dinner, and the kids aren't the biggest fans of her famous Brussels sprouts. And what is even cooler is that the deal includes a free movie rental coupon right on the box. Samantha simply scans the movie rental coupon with her Gimbal-powered app's amazing image recognition feature and rents the movie right then and there. With Gimbal, you can offer easy-to-use privacy controls and data storage security. Gimbal also contains advanced power conservation management abilities, saving precious mobile phone battery life. Finally, Gimbal delivers relevant content to your users' special interests. Consumers will no longer have to deal with the annoyance of being bombarded by irrelevant, clutter-producing advertisements. Samantha can rest easy because her phone has her back. Gimbal, wherever you go, there you are. And so is Gimbal. Visit us at www.gimbal.com. Gimbal.com and get Gimbal integrated into your app now.
Okay. Great. Well, that gives you a sort of flavor of the facilities that are available in Gimbal. You may have noticed the image recognition functionality there. That's being moved largely to the Vuforia SDK now, but you can certainly use Vuforia in combination with Gimbal to get that sort of behavior. So what's Gimbal then? Well, Gimbal is a suite of technologies for enabling context-aware applications. So on the device, Gimbal is an SDK for integrating it with your application. And in the cloud, Qualcomm hosts the Gimbal Manager. And the Gimbal Manager establishes configurable geographical boundaries called geofences. It generates communications with devices when they enter or leave those boundaries. And it helps you to analyze the behavior of your users. The device SDK and the Gimbal Manager work together, and they pass data backwards and forwards to enable the Gimbal service. Sorry. Gimbal also features trustee certified privacy controls, and this is really about increasing user trust and confidence in your application. Has a battery-friendly implementation, which ensures that all these location updates which take place are handled in a way that doesn't sacrifice battery life. So it doesn't keep the GPS chip alive the whole time. It basically puts it on only temporarily. And if battery life starts to get low, it uses mechanisms other than GPS in order to find your location in a more battery-friendly way. Gimbal is also free, so it means if your app wants to take advantage of all these features, and it doesn't cost you anything. And that's great as an application developer. So what are your alternatives to Gimbal? If you're approaching this kind of development where you want to do this sort of behavior, what else could you use to do it? Well, these are some of the options that you've kind of got. The first one is DIY, do it yourself. So if you want to do it yourself, what do you have to do? Well, on iOS, you've got what's called region monitoring in core location, and Android, you've got location manager. Now, the problem is that if you use these things, that's fine, but it's only one small aspect of the service. And you're not really taking advantage of a wheel that Qualcomm has effectively created already that you can take advantage of. One of the key things is that you don't have these privacy notifications, which are very important to have and supply to your users legally, to try and give your users a sense that they control their data, and in fact allow them to delete any data that they don't want shared with you. And this is sort of enabled in Gimbal, and you would have to sort of enable this yourself, which can be quite difficult. On iOS, in any case, there's geofencing limitations. You are limited to the number of live geofences you can have in an application, and if you use the Gimbal service, you escape those sort of issues. And Qualcomm's done a lot of experimentation to try and strike the right balance between battery life and performance. So a lot of that hard work that's gone into making sure that the user experience is a good one, you will have to do that experimentation again yourself, which is quite costly. It does cost a lot of money, therefore, because you have to develop these things yourself. And of all the possible solutions, this could be the most expensive because your time is worth something. And so to reinvent this would cost you quite a lot of time. The other thing is you do miss features that arrive in Gimbal. So Qualcomm has designed the system to be able to extend the functionality at a time to add new context awareness things. So for example, if Qualcomm were to integrate something for internal building, kind of knowing where you are inside a building, for example, you wouldn't be able to take advantage of that quickly, which if you use Gimbal, you'd be able to take advantage of. The second one I've highlighted there is the third-party API. Now, there are providers doing the geofencing sort of thing. One of the ones that you may have heard of is GeoLoqui. GeoLoqui is a powerful platform for location-based services, but it costs money. They charge for your, for you to use it, although it's free for very limited use. It's only radial, so you can only say you can only specify a point in a radius. Whereas what Qualcomm's done with Gimbal is it has enabled polygonal fencing. So you can define a polygon of an area and know when you've traveled into or out of that polygon. Whereas with something like geolocal, you've only got a radius, which can be quite limiting. You've also got companies like Sense Networks who do these proprietary packages where you basically pay them to kind of develop a solution for you. And these can be very expensive. It's very difficult to find out how much these solutions cost as a developer. Generally speaking, when I see these things as a developer, I think like an expensive restaurant. If you go to an expensive restaurant and you get the menu, and the menu doesn't have a price on the items, you need to go to a different restaurant because you probably can't afford it. So there's a lot of convenience in tailored packages, obviously. Someone sort of worries about all these things for you, but you do lose a lot of control of the process. And if you're a developer, you're used to dealing with APIs and integrating with APIs, so you shouldn't have to worry about that sort of thing because you can use the APIs yourself. So why pay someone else to do that? Anyway, so how does Gimbal work then? Well, let me explain a bit of terminology from Gimbal so that you can sort of understand some of the things which I'm referring to. So firstly, there's geofencing. So a geofence is a bounded geographical area, and it's usually expressed as either a radius or a polygon. It's interesting because you want to know about when a fence is crossed when you go into or leave a sort of fenced area, and when a user has remained sort of inside a fenced area for a certain period of time. So you can see in this example here how the device establishes its location. So generally speaking, you can use all kinds of things. You can use GPS, cell ID, you can use Wi-Fi access point information. And the Gimbal Manager then contains details about the geofences that have been set up. And applications download details about the geofences from the server via the Gimbal SDK. Now, when a device or a user moves out of the area of the geofence, an event is then triggered, and that's what happens when you travel outside that fence. Now, communication is an event which is sent to your phone with information from the server. Now, these can be ads, they could be context-related alerts, or they can be warnings that are presented to your user when something happens. So when your position is uploaded to the Gimbal Manager, the manager examines some rules to determine whether the change in user context implies some action. And if it does, then the Gimbal Manager sends a piece of content to the application which can be used to update the state of the application. And as you can see here, it's in a sort of JSON-like format here, so you can sort of see what's going on. The format is kind of hidden behind the SDK, but that's the sort of details you get from the server. So you can sort of react to the information in that way. Interests are something which is currently disabled in the Gimbal SDK, but which Qualcomm is working to re-enable. And this is basically about building up a profile of user interests, of what a user is interested in. And this is information that you get from things the user does on their device. So for example, web browsing behavior, so which sites they visited, obviously which locations they've been to, and which apps they have installed. And those bits of information are then collated and used to determine which sorts of things a user is interested in. And that interest profile then gets uploaded to the server when the device is plugged in at night, and the server uses that over time to build up a profile of user interests. Now, these interests, once you get those, these can be used to target communications much more exactly. So you can limit the demographic of use to only women or only men of a certain age group who are interested in football, for example, or a particular book or type of book or the kind of music they're interested in, and you can target them. Now that sounds a bit kind of ominous in a way, but that's why there's quite good privacy controls that have been inspected by a third party to try and give users a strong sense of control of that data. So what Gimbal has is they've got privacy settings, and these are not an optional part of the SDK. When you include the Gimbal library, you include a link effectively to the privacy controls. And these privacy controls are given to you by Gimbal, and they're downloaded from the web. So there's no facility for you to effectively to change these. And what it does is for every module that's enabled, you allow users to be able to sort of change these settings or to delete them completely. And because you have effectively a third party between you and the user, this third party is then able to, effectively you don't get information specifically about the identity of your user, you get a summarized version of what their interests are. At any point in time, the user can say, delete my data, in order to get rid of it. So users control permissions as to which modules are enabled, which modules that the application can use. All the legal language that's associated with user privacy is provided for you. Normally you'd have to pay a lawyer to come up with the right privacy language. Users control their data. They can control whether it continues to be used or is deleted. And the big thing is that it's the third party has inspected it. So trustee is a well-known name in user security and privacy and trust, and they've certified that these controls are suitable for users. So let's have a little look now at the Gimbal Manager. The Gimbal Manager is the server side, the cloud-based component that's at the heart of the Gimbal system. Now, if you recall, this is where you define your geofences, your communications, and where your analytics data is logged. And it's very easy to get an account. You go to the Gimbal website and you sign up with a valid email address, click through the legal agreement, and off you go. You have access to the server, to the cloud environment. So, as you'll sort of no doubt be aware, when deploying to a server, you often have to have a distinction between a sandbox and between a production sort of server. So a sandbox environment is where you can sort of do your development, and a production server is where you finally do your deployment. If you come along, I mean, I can show you live a bit later if you've got time afterwards. I might be able to show you sort of what it looks like live. But the key differences to be aware of between the sandbox and the production environment are that the sandbox is much easier to get up and running with. Once you've signed in, that's all you need. The production server does require you to give them to submit your app for approval. So they want to check to make sure that you've integrated the privacy settings correctly and things like that before you're allowed to use the production server with a particular app. The sandbox needs you to generate an API key, which is just keyed off the app package name for Android or the bundle ID for iOS. Whereas on the server, it also requires you to submit your certificate fingerprint for Android when you submit for production as an extra kind of layer of security. And on iOS, you don't have to do that because Apple sort of takes care of that for you. Finally, apps which are set up to communicate with Sandbox include a debug menu. So in that sort of privacy control screen, you saw that there are delete my data and things like that. There's also a debug menu in the permissions screen which lets you as a developer sort of access information about what's being held on the server. It lets you simulate events, it lets you query places and do other activities like that. So here's a sort of screenshot of the Gimbal environment. You can sort of see the production environment here is selected, and you can sort of see what the sort of setup looks like. You need to submit an application if you want to sort of set it up, but you can see you get a sort of server API key here, because the server also has a REST API to enable you to do things with it. By contrast, in the sandbox environment, you can see you don't have any submission details. You can just basically get an API key and off you go. All you need to do there is you type in your package name or bundle ID, and that's what gives you your application API key. So once you've entered your package name here, you'll then get the client sort of API key produced for you. When you get that API key, that's what you use to configure your Gimbal SDK. So you need to supply that when you initialize Gimbal, and it will communicate with the server and log in correctly and all that. So when you define a geofence in Gimbal, you click on sort of the left-hand side here to get to the geofence menu, and this sort of shows you how you define a geofence. The key thing to notice, obviously, is you can create them one at a time, but there was also a facility to bulk upload geofences. So a good example of this might be if you're creating a service to find the nearest bank machine to get the cash out. If you have a big database of where all these are, you can format it into a CSV file and then upload them in bulk to the server to very quickly get that sort of behavior. And a lot of that sort of information is available in public ways. So there are some public geographical information databases which enable you to get hold of part of these, which you might find useful in adding this sort of functionality to the application using the Gimbal. Excuse me. No, I'm not going to sneeze. Sorry. So that's how you define these. Obviously, the difference between a radial and a polygonal geofence is whether you just have a radius or whether you define an actual polygon. Once you've selected what you want to create here, you then get a nice Google Maps interface which enables you to find the spot that you want to put the geofence around. In the example, I've created a radial one near my work location. So this is where I am in Cambridge, very nice Cambridge River there. And you select basically your radius and stuff like that. And you can search for addresses in Google Maps too. So that's my office as an example which I set up. And my clicker has stopped working. 1 second. Communications are set up in a separate area, so you select the communications on the left-hand side there, and this basically enables you to establish messages which are going to be sent when a geofence event takes place of some kind. You can cause these to happen when someone arrives at a location or when they depart from it, and you can add, edit, or delete communications over here. When you define a communication, what you need is a name, obviously, and a start and end date. You have a time frame in which one of these things, these campaigns, they call them, are valid, and you need to define how long it's for. And then you've got different triggers here. So a context trigger says basically a geofence when you arrive at a certain geofence, and you can sort of specify which geofences you want to include. So it can be one or multiple locations. You can instantiate a certain type of communication. And the content of that communication is then sent to the device. And this is the sort of content. If you remember from the slide earlier, I showed you a little JSON snippet. This is the sort of information you can send down in the notification. The really interesting thing here is the URL, which of course doesn't have to be a web URL, it can be an app URL, so that you can trigger certain app behavior by effectively calling back into your application by using a service handler or something like that. Now the analytics is also very interesting and very useful. It enables you to see who's been where, how long they've dwelled inside a certain geofence, so how long they've remained in a geofence. And you can filter these out by geofence and date range, and it gives you a better picture of where people are and what they're doing, and who's doing what. And you can download some of this information as well. I think you can export it for other external analysis. Right, so let's have a little talk then about the client side. Let's talk about what's available on the Android and iPhone SDKs. So one of the key architectural concepts to understanding the Gimbal API is the idea of connectors and listeners. So because the Gimbal architecture is modular, over time new context services can be added by Qualcomm, and at the moment you've only got really location and interests, and interests is sort of disabled. So location is really the one context thing you'll be most interested in using at the moment. So that's basically what those are. Now a connector basically is what communicates with the Gimbal server, and it represents that communications link. You initialize it at startup time as a singleton, and the two connectors that are exposed to you are the context core connector, which is sort of the main protocol that you use to talk to the server, and the place connector, which handles the geofencing API. So listeners in Gimbal they implement an interface that gets callbacks when interesting data is available that's relevant to the connector in question. So this pattern here of your app talking to the Gimbal SDK via a listener through an initialized connector is kind of a standard sort of pattern in how you do things. So the place connector gives you place notifications, and the interest connector gives you interest notifications if you have the interest one enabled. Right, so what does the core connector do? Well, the core connector represents your main connection to the backend service. You show users the permissions API using the core connector. It's possible to be notified if the user changes permissions. So if they disable certain permissions or re-enable them, you can do something to notify your user about what effect that's going to have on the application. And once they've agreed to using the Gimbal service, all the communications that are sent down from the server, these come to you through the core context connector. So when a content event takes place, in other words, a piece of content has arrived because of a trigger of some kind, it arrives as an event from the core context listener. The place connector is obviously your connection to the geofencing backend. So via that connector, you have a listing of places which you've defined. So when you define your location list in the Gimbal manager, the place connector enables you to list those places and see what they are. And that's where you receive your entry and exit events. So when you've instantiated your listener, entry and exit events are sent through that API. This also gives you the ability to set what are called private places. And a private place is private to the user, and it doesn't get sent to the Gimbal backend. So if the user wants to define a particular area which is only of interest to them, and which they want to maintain as private to them, you're able to do that using the place connector. So how does the application lifecycle work, and what's your sort of rough order of business when you're writing an application with Gimbal? So basically, you initialize the context core connector. You then enable it. You need to check whether or not it's already been enabled, and if it isn't, you enable it. And this action with the core connector causes the Gimbal permission screen to be displayed to the user. So the user then sees some notification saying, okay, this application uses Gimbal. Read the legal language around the Gimbal service, agree to the terms and conditions, and okay, off you go. Once they've done that, then you initialize the context place connector, which enables you to start listening to these place events as they come in. And then finally, you listen for content events on the context core connector, which are on Android, or the place connector on iOS, which basically tells you when something of interest has happened and what the content from the server is. Right, so that's the main sort of application lifecycle. It's very simple. Again, the nice thing about Gimbal is there's some good documentation on the website. So if you sign up to the Gimbal thing and give them your email address, you'll be able to download the SDK and all the documentation around it. And particularly for Android, it's very simple, straightforward documentation about what you have to add to your manifest and the code you have to write in order to get the connection working. And it's very, very straightforward. It shouldn't take you, it shouldn't take you more than a few hours if you're a developer to sort of connect it up. I hope. It didn't take me more than a few hours. Right, so how about deploying Gimbal? So just a few thoughts on deploying Gimbal in a commercial environment. The big thing that's interesting and useful is in a commercial environment, you've got a REST interface to the Gimbal manager. So the Gimbal manager is fine to use using the web UI if you're not doing too much interaction with it, if it's just sort of testing stuff out. But if you're doing this commercially, obviously adding new locations, changing communication, is something you might well want to integrate with your own server. And that's really what this API enables you to do. So this REST interface lets you bulk load geofence data, so you can upload an entirely new set of geofence information. You can add, edit, and delete instances of geofences, and you can add and edit and delete communications as well. So if you go and have a look at, there is a wiki at this location, and slides will be available after the talk, I think on the website. So if you go to this URL here, you can actually read the API description and documentation, so you can learn about how to integrate that with a script or your own server to sort of see how that interaction works. If you are doing this in a vertical market or enterprise deployment of some kind, Qualcomm would like to talk to you because there are some specific functionality that you might find useful. There is an email address for interest in this on the Gimbal website, I believe. For other commercial questions and things like that, Bernd is the man to speak to, and he will be happy to answer questions on that sort of basis. But that's basically it for Gimbal. Are there any questions that I can answer for you? Do you have any questions? I hope so. Because if you ask a good question, there might be a present.
You said all this is free of charge?
This is all free of charge, yes. There is no price.
So how do you make money?
That's a good question someone asked last time, the same thing with before. So Qualcomm makes money from selling chips. Selling chips. And so when you have a piece of advanced functionality for users like this, it encourages users to buy more capable handsets, which means that you sell more chips.
You know, my son is turning 5. Actually, I have 2 kids, but my son is the elder one. And my explanation for him is, it's like going to the hairdresser. So if you go to the hairdresser, you might get chocolate in this case, or coffee in my case. So the hairdresser is not charging you for the coffee, but you want to make sure that you have a better user experience in the end. And first of all, want to go to the hairdresser next time again, instead of asking your wife to cut their hair. And second, also to go to this specific hairdresser, right? And so, from our perspective, this is kind of investment into the mobile ecosystem to make it even more compelling for end users buying smartphones. Want to support developers to further differentiate and offer this new type of functionality as value add in the market. And as Nick said, so luckily we enjoy very good sources of revenue, namely chipsets and licensing fees. So we don't have to earn money by those software technologies. But if this is driving the mobile ecosystem, and if more people migrate from 2G to 3G, then Qualcomm will benefit a lot because we have a very strong market position.
Good question. Other questions? There can only be one winner of the book then. That's great. Thank you very much for your questions. If there are any other questions you have, please feel free to ask me afterwards. But otherwise, I will present a reward for the best question to the only question. There you go. So thank you very much for coming along to the presentation. And if there's any more questions, thank you very much. I think we're okay time-wise? 2 minutes. 5:13. So. Great.